Principal, and to my panelists for allowing all of us to be part of such an interesting and pertinent conversation. My name is Mark. I'm the co-founder with a friend and now colleague of mine, Raul Vergara from Chile, of a program called the Global Leaders Program. And this is an opportunistic program. It's an exploitative program, but it's also a very compassionate and empathetic program. And I use these words up front because I think these describe what, in many respects, we've lacked in this field, and it's sort of sent us down a road that we find ourselves in today, where we're disconnected from many of the opportunities that are out there on the ground if we could come out of the sort of glass tower that has been the orchestral world for so long. Before I start to tell you about the Global Leaders Program, it's important to sort of present a picture of the opportunity and sort of the reality on the ground that this program is responding to, because when you understand that, you see sort of how this is built and how this has been grown. And describing that requires stepping into sort of another hat that I wear, which you see on the screen, which has to do with the Orchestra of the Americas. So the Orchestra of the Americas is a pan-hemispheric initiative that was modeled on the Asian Youth Orchestra. It's about bringing together the top young musicians up to the age of 30 from across about 30 countries in North and South America. And the program is 15 years old, and in many respects, it was modeled on what you would imagine a festival to be. We sent out recruiters to do live auditions in all of the major capitals of North and South America. We would bring these musicians together, bring in coaches, faculty from top orchestras like the Berlin Phil and the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, et cetera, to come and train these musicians and prepare them to lead concert tours. Now, the first 6 or 7 years of the orchestra were terrific. We had Deutsche Bank as our sponsor. It takes this is an organization that can't really find government support because we cast our nets way too wide. And it's hard to sort of actually attract any bodies that want to follow this orchestra around the continent. So we had a great multinational sponsor, and we could sort of do what we wanted. We would fly from Boston Symphony Hall to Carnegie Hall to Teatro Colón in Argentina to Mexico City. And we had this incredible artistic package, high-level musicians representing the talent of a full continent, working with great artists. People like Yo-Yo Ma would come on tour with us. Gustavo Dudamel was our principal conductor for a number of years. And then the financial crisis hit in 2008. And this is actually the time when we became who we are today because we were forced to reinvent ourselves. We lost Deutsche Bank. We had to completely transform our business model. And in hindsight, it was a stressful time, but in hindsight, that allowed us and forced us to sift through what we could be that is sort of who we've become today. So instead of doing these big international tours, we had to ask ourselves, how can we make ourselves valuable to the communities where we perform? And that meant not just giving concerts, it meant putting the orchestra in the position of doing community work where it traveled, running music camps, essentially looking at any ways that this orchestra could bring value to the community. It also meant not doing these massive international tours, but instead focusing on one country, for example, Chile, and trying to do a 12-concert tour of Chile. Well, in Chile, there's only about 3 cities that have concert promoters that will commercially present you. It also required us to basically go into the space of being a commercially funded orchestra. So we cut youth from our name, we upped our ages, and we started to take on a much more professional profile in terms of the caliber of the music. To be able to sell tickets, to be able to have promoters get behind us and take a risk on the product. But if you look at Chile, you can only do about 3 concerts that way, selling tickets. There's just not an infrastructure to go anywhere else financed by the community. So instead, if you take a country like Chile, we would go and reach out to the local mayors, to the local music schools, and say, look, we want to come to your community, we want to do a concert, but what can we do to make you pay for it? And in doing that, we discovered what the needs were on the ground. They would say, come, but spend a day working with our teachers, because we don't have access to teacher training. Do your concert, but put our kids on stage with you so that we can show our local government sort of what our ambition is as a program and what we can potentially achieve. And we started to discover all these new sort of forms of what an orchestra on tour can actually be. And in some ways, it transformed our tours into much less glamorous projects than they once were, but in the sense of the meaning, they've never been more meaningful. In the process, we came to know about all these communities that needed teachers, that were basically part of this movement across so much of the emerging world where education is one of the fastest growing sectors, and where an orchestra, and in particular a youth orchestra, can act as a very efficient inclusion vehicle, capacitation vehicle. And this is the story of sort of the 20th century and 21st century in classical music, is I think the emergence of this new purpose for what an orchestra can be to a community at sort of the very bottom of society, working its way up. And we saw in places like Belize, Nicaragua, Senegal, Tanzania, we saw a real need on the ground to help these initiatives move forward, and a need that went beyond what we could do on tours, performing somewhere for 3 days and running a few workshops. So again, coming back to this idea of sort of opportunistic, I bring this up because if we hadn't have done this and gone through this process, we would have never known about this need. The other need had to do with our musicians. We were focused on outputting very high-level performers that could play perfect, technically at the highest level, but there weren't enough jobs. And they just weren't prepared for sort of the realities on the other side. And the conservatories haven't really thought about this. I think this is a question that they sort of find it hard to grapple with. And we started to see that the opportunities for musicians were actually creative opportunities, that if they could sort of just add a few skills and a few insights into who they were, they could graduate from our program and go on and do really interesting things. And I'll tell you a little bit about those things. But those are the two realities that we responded to in creating what's become the Global Leaders Program. It's a program that started very small, that's now expanded considerably. And we have students here today. We have a member of our faculty here today, Eric Booth. And we feel that this is just the beginning. So I'll walk you through the program itself. So is there someone controlling that? Here we go. I got it. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through, this is just the overview. The Global Leaders Program is a 9-month professional certificate course in 3 subjects, and these are broad subjects: community development, teaching artistry, and social entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship with the aim of helping the community. It's for musicians, it's for high-level musicians. The fundamental components of the program are that our students travel on at least 2 10-day missions where they serve as volunteers on the ground, putting their learning in the program to the test as teaching artists in communities, but also as observers, understanding the dynamic of local projects, what works, what doesn't work, and bringing those perspectives back to who they are and what they'll eventually do with the program. It includes tailored curiosity. We're an orchestra. We know community development, we know artistry, but we don't know how to run an academic calendar. So in addition to, as the sort of the backbone of the program, we have 2 universities that curate the fundamental courses that the students take. One university in the UK and a university in Canada. But this coursework is complemented by what you can't get in universities, which are amazing live experts from a whole diverse array of fields. And they're all the fields that musicians don't come into contact with in school. So we have neuroscientists come and talk about cognitive learning and the role that music plays in childhood development. We have psychologists come and talk about working with kids who've been abused, or families that are in very difficult situations, and how to communicate and work with them in a way that you can't that doesn't translate to teaching in a vacuum. And this goes all the way extends into the world of business, entrepreneurship, leadership, team building, a whole variety of topics that I won't go through, but sort of give some insight into this live component that complements the coursework. We have now 35 emerging leaders in the program from all over the world. And it's a very cost-effective program for students. It's it's essentially for graduate students. Our average age is about 32 in the program, and busy professionals. So here are the people, these are the personas of sort of the people that this program targets. Catherine is basically your typical North American graduate student in performance. She's a very high-level accomplished violinist. She's auditioning for orchestras. She's not sure when she's going to get a job in an orchestra. She's also increasingly sort of separated from the meaning that she once had as a younger musician. She used to travel to music festivals. Music was something that was fun and communal for her, and she's lost that. She's worried about her job opportunities. She also feels increasingly that the world only sees her sort of one-dimensionally. Carlos. Carlos is a clarinetist from Colombia who's the star of his community. He was the greatest sort of product of his local youth orchestra, community youth orchestra. This could be in sort of almost any town in Latin America. And he wants to go abroad to continue studying, but he doesn't have the resources to be able to do it. He also doesn't want to go abroad and work in a professional orchestra. His commitment is to his home community. But he knows that he needs access to more knowledge, more experience, and a bigger network than he currently has to fulfill his dream. Jill is a teaching artist, so she's already working in an after-school program. There are many of these in the United States. There are many of these actually all across the world now. Jill is a teaching artist in an after-school program, and she's trying to climb the ladder. She's seen essentially only as a teacher, as a performer, and for her to advance, she needs to add some skills onto who she is. Michael is an administrator in a professional orchestra that coming back to what Eric said at the start of the day, is part of this transformation that professional orchestras are having to go through, where they're finding new ways to make themselves relevant to the community. Well, he's being tasked with the process, but he doesn't know how to do that. He also has a performance background. And then Tim. Tim is a retiring music school teacher who has a dream to start a project in the Philippines as the next chapter of his life. And this is an interesting character because it's sort of an unlikely one, but this is part of who we go after. So these people actually represent big opportunities, they're challenges. There are about 4,000 Catherines out there at least. These are conservative estimates. There are tons of Carloses all across the Americas and in some ways it respects the world. There are at least 1,200 teaching artists like Jill in STEM-inspired programs in the US and Canada alone. Most North American orchestras are trying to do what Michael's being tasked with doing. And every year, a large number of orchestra teachers retire from the public school system. So here's the real life potential. These are people who've passed through our program. Deborah is a Brazilian. As a master's student, she founded a project in Chicago that serves 300 kids. It's called Your Chicago. It was bought by the People's Music School. Like a great entrepreneur, she sold the business. I mean, she didn't profit on it, but the program is now sustained forever. And she started a second orchestra in a place called Bahia in Brazil that also was absorbed by a program called Neojiba, a bigger project. And she's now working in one of the top orchestras in the world as a player. Guillermo Marin, in Colombia, the clarinetist that I spoke to you about, passed through the program and was asked to become the director of a school that's now expanded to 2,100 students and 61 teachers. Debbie is a teaching artist in a program in Philadelphia called Play on Philly, and after passing through the program, she's now moving up the ladder. Scott he works in the Detroit Symphony, and he was one of the people that helped bring that symphony back from the brink by making it more relevant to the community. So this is a big orchestra. This is sort of showing you the diversity. And then Michael is this teacher that I spoke to you about, who's now building a project in the Philippines and starting chapter 2 of his life. How do they do it? They ran through this program. They've been through this world-class professional development program, addressing the real-world needs of musicians who strive to achieve more impact but lack the tools and perspectives to get there. So it works through 3 pillars. I spoke to you about the course. You can see it on the screen. There's the seminar, there's the live missions, which is totally unique, where they travel out into the field. And then finally, the 3rd pillar is all the students work on a project over the course of the year that's meant to bring value to their community. That essentially includes an artistic vision, a pedagogical vision, a business vision. It has all of the ingredients needed to actually get off the ground. So we're connecting a need with an opportunity. It's very much focused on the experience of participants. We keep the costs very low by having value added at every step of the way by the participants. So when our participants travel on missions, the communities that receive them pay for their costs because they're bringing great teaching skills. So there's a learning going, there's a sort of value exchange happening both ways. We have a board that helps to provide the overhead costs, again, keeping tuition low for participants. And we only increase costs for participants in step with commensurate value in the experience and what they get. The program couldn't have been built without the history and the network of the orchestra that I described, so that's sort of what secures this program. It's also very nimble. Part of the reason why academia has had a hard time doing this is because there's so much red tape. So we take the best from the academic world, but also pair that with the best from the opportunistic world of sort of a small business, which we are. And by limiting the course to highly accomplished performers, we ensure that costs stay low because of the fact that our students bring value where they travel. Here are some stats about the impact of the program. I won't run through them all, but just to say that at each step we verify and, and confirm, and we also adjust. So this is by no means a perfect formula. Every year, in fact, every month, every week, we're adjusting the program. And as my final slide, I'll just share a few thoughts on the future of the program for us. Our first objective is to continue increasing the quality of the program to the students. So we want to have more on-the-ground learning. That's part of our vision. We want to bring more universities into curating aspects of the program. That's something that will start next year. It's too soon to make those announcements, but there's some interesting and exciting university partners coming in for next year. We want to connect our graduates with pipelines to incubators and venture philanthropists that can help them to take their final projects to the real world and sort of connect funding with those ideas. And then we also, this is an English language course, so we have some quantitative aspirations. We'd love to develop a Spanish language course in alliance with some university partners in the Spanish-speaking world. Our universities can't certify a Spanish-speaking program right now. We'd love to have an Asian time zone version of the course. We have a lot of demand from that part of the world, but we can't accommodate them right now. And we'd like to expand beyond instrumentalists in the future and perhaps even create an automated light version of the program. So this is a snapshot of what we're doing. This is just the beginning, but it's, for us, it's an incredibly meaningful step forward. So thank you very much.